All right, looks like numbers are slowing down, so I'm going to get us started. All right, good afternoon, good morning, good evening from wherever you're joining us today. My name is Mike Ciaramella. I'm the Seafood Safety and Technology Specialist with New York Sea Grant and Cornell University, and recently joined AFTO as the Seafood HACCP Alliance Director, but I have not left Cornell. I'm still the seafood specialist with Cornell, and today I'm wearing my seafood specialist hat as the chair of the community engagement work group. And we're here to present the third and final webinar of our community engagement webinar series. And this one's focused on Seafood HACCP Alliance, seafood resources, and a variety of other resources that can complement your trainings and be a resource to your participants, as well as you as a trainer of the Seafood HACCP Alliance training program. So I'll get started with some housekeeping today. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat at any time. We'll have a Q&A session towards the end. At that time, you can feel free to raise your hand and our administrators will unmute you and you can ask that question live. Okay. We will start off with just a quick overview and introduction to the Seafood HACCP Alliance training materials that are available to trainers to support the curriculum and the training program. Starting with the training manuals, we have 3 different training manuals. We have the Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point Training Curriculum. We currently released the 7th edition in August of 2024. So for anyone who wasn't aware, there is a new blue book available on the Florida Sea Grant website. It's available digitally at the moment, and soon it will be available as a hard copy that you can purchase through the University of Florida Sea Grant. We have the blue book, SGR 137, and the orange book, SGR 134, is actually the Spanish version of that training curriculum. We also have the FDA Fish and Fishery Products Hazards and Controls Guidance. This is the FDA managed guidance. It's currently the 4th edition from June of 2022. This guidance is now being updated chapter by chapter. So make sure anytime you're doing a training, you're going on and ensuring that the chapters you're working with within the hazards guide are the most up-to-date versions of that chapter. Florida Sea Grant is now issuing that book as a binder so that you can easily replace updated chapters as they're updated. Again, that is also available in English and Spanish. The last training curriculum or manual you can access through Florida Sea Grant online is the Sanitation Control Procedures for Processing Fish and Fishery Products. The most up-to-date version of that is still our 1st edition 2000, but there is an update in progress now, so you can keep an eye out for a new sanitation control procedures training and some more information on how trainers can start to offer that new training in the coming year. We also have a variety of other resources available on that Florida Sea Grant website to support that training curriculum, and that is the training worksheets, including our hazard analysis forms, the HACCP plan forms, and the product descriptions. All 13 training models that are required for conducting the HACCP Alliance training are also available through there, along with an introduction to using those models and a guidance document with best practices for conducting practical exercises using them. You can find all the presentation slides for the basic segment 2 and the SCP course on that website as well. And as these resources and tools are updated, you should look out for emails or blasts from the Alliance with these new resources. The last one I want to touch on are some additional resources that you can find on the Seafood HACCP Alliance website that's hosted by the Association of Food and Drug Officials. This includes the information on where you can register courses, access the course protocols, look at and provide feedback for the models, as well as a trainer FAQ that's currently being updated. So we'll jump to that page real quick and we'll walk through some of the resources that are available there. You can quickly jump to the different sections of this page here at the top, but we're going to quickly walk through each one. The first is our course registration. So anytime you're registering a HACCP Alliance training, you can go here to start that application process and submit that for your course. If you're not a trainer but interested in becoming one, there's information on how you can find and join the Train to Trainers cadre and become one of the HACCP Alliance qualified trainers and start offering these trainings. You have the course protocols are also linked on this website. So if you're not have questions about the policies and protocols for actually conducting the trainings, you can find those here. The training manuals I talked about earlier are also linked here. This is going to take you to that Florida Sea Grant website, but you can also access it through the trainer page on the Seafood HACCP Alliance website. We also have the trainer resources section here, which again, the HACCP instructor presentations and model HACCP plans will take you back to that Florida Sea Grant website. The Seafood HACCP video series will take you to the FDA website that houses the hazards guide, as well as this series of videos that can be helpful in supplementing trainings on specific topics that may be of interest to your participants. And lastly, in this section that trainers are maybe not as familiar with is the feedback on model plans. There is a link and a form there where you can submit feedback for the various HACCP Alliance models, whether it be a recommendation for updates, a question about something, or something you think needs to be corrected on those models. You can provide that feedback that goes to our models work group chair, and that they work through addressing whatever that is. If you're finishing up a course and you're ready to wrap up and apply for your certificates to have those issued, you can go to the course conclusion section here, and it outlines that process of how you close a course out. Also has links to all the required documentation for closing that course out, including your instructor worksheets, your student information sheets, as well as your invoice templates, and a virtual evaluation form for anyone doing virtual trainings. The last thing on this webpage is going to be your trainer FAQs. These are going to be frequently asked questions with responses to help you understand the training protocols and policies through the Seafood HACCP Alliance and AFTO. This is being updated, and you'll see some new frequently asked questions added to this, specifically around the segment 1 course and the new change in structure and terminology when it comes to identifying and confirming completion for your participants in your segment 2 trainings. All right, so with that, I'll jump back to our presentation. I'm going to pass the screen in just a second over to our speakers to introduce some additional resources. Again, all of the resources we're presenting here today are kind of an added bonus to participating in a Seafood HACCP Alliance training, right? They're covering materials that we can't necessarily cover in that training curriculum, but can be provided to participants after or used by you as trainers to better acquaint yourselves with various topics that are not specific to the Seafood HACCP regulation itself, but are relevant and adjacent to that regulation and may be necessary for many of your producers and processors that you're training. So first we'll have Lisa Weddig, who's the Chief Food Safety Science Officer with the National Fisheries Institute. Lisa's going to share a variety of free resources that are available through NFI on traceability, as well as several other topics. Then we'll jump to Christina DeWitt, Director of the Oregon State University Seafood Lab, to introduce the Seafood Network Information Center, which is a clearinghouse or web portal with a lot of relevant information on seafood safety and processing. Lastly, we'll jump to Keith Skiles, the Executive Director of the Interstate Shellfish Sanitation Conference. And Keith is going to introduce the new 2023 update to the National Shellfish Sanitation Program, or NSSP Model Ordinance. After that, I'll jump back on and introduce this new resource that provides live links to all of these documents that will be available to trainers to provide their participants post-training. All right, Lisa, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Mike, and welcome everyone. So I'm just going to go through some of the resources that the National Fisheries Institute has developed for our members, and which we have made available to anyone who wants to access them, because these resources really help the entire seafood community. So for those of you that don't know the National Fisheries Institute, we are the leading trade association for the seafood community, and NFI as a nonprofit and its members support and promote sound public policy based on ground truth science. And again, normally the materials that we develop are just for our members, but there are certain materials that we want to share because they benefit the entire seafood community. So the first resource that you might find beneficial for your training or just for your general knowledge is our document, Ready to Eat Seafood Pathogen Control Guidance Manual. And it addresses the control of Listeria monocytogenes and Salmonella species in ready-to-eat seafood products. And it's available if you want to scan that QR code. I have QR codes for all the documents if you want to scan that, or later on when the webinar recording is posted, feel free to do that. Download the document. You can share that with your students, or again, just as general educational knowledge for yourself. But the focus of this guidance document is really to outline the elements of an effective environmental pathogen control plan for seafood. And one thing that is emphasized in this manual is how an environmental monitoring program fits into the Seafood HACCP regulation, since seafood, through that regulation, doesn't specifically mandate having an environmental monitoring program to control for these environmental pathogens. So this document is, again, focused on a food safety problem with ready-to-eat seafood. Another food safety resource that is being developed, so stay tuned. NFI has a sushi council who is developing a specific website that will house food safety resources for the production of sushi. So when that's available, we'll certainly make the Seafood HACCP Alliance community available of that document. The next slide, please. So one thing that you may be getting questions on, or maybe you have questions yourself, is really about FDA's new food traceability regulation that will go into effect in January of 2026. And NFI has been working since the rule was published to provide resources to help our members implement the requirements to this regulation. So I'm not going to go through the rule, but again, we've developed a lot of resources to help you understand what this regulation entails and how that regulation can be implemented in the seafood industry. So the document that we're sharing here through this QR code is what I'm referring to as a virtual handout. It's a PDF document. You don't want to print it for your students, but you want to share with them the electronic PDF, because each of those underlined subjects on the PDF are direct links to either templates or worksheets. There is a recorded presentation, so it provides you with resources that you can share or just go through yourself. Next slide, please. So some of the resources that you will find links to on that document are templates and worksheets that our members have found very helpful. The first one is a mapping exercise worksheet that helps companies really understand their current traceability practices and where information is available in their current documents. So that if you're a consultant and you're helping the industry figure out how to implement this regulation, that's a good place to start. But the other items here are what is available on that virtual handout. Next slide, please. And then switching to another topic that's not food safety related, but that often comes up in discussions about seafood, really has to do with seafood labeling and seafood fraud. So NFI, through our Better Seafood Board, has developed an industry guidance of best practices for addressing seafood fraud. And the focus of this document is really two-pronged, and it's really directed to two different audiences. One are for processors or sellers of seafood product, and it outlines best practices to make sure that they're not committing fraud. And then the second audience are buyers, and it's best practices for buyers to make sure they're receiving the product that they want to receive. So again, this has really nothing to do with Seafood HACCP, but you might find it as a good resource for you and your students. Next slide, please. And the last two documents that I want to point out are just guidance to labeling, because we find there's a lot of questions about labeling in the seafood industry. So we have a 6-page document that really outlines FDA's labeling requirements. And it's really just to make sure that the seafood labels are truthful and not misleading. And the next slide, please. And the last document that I want to share is just an outline of FDA's requirements for declaring ingredients, because that seems to be a common area of misunderstanding and misinformation about what ingredients that are added to products. need to be declared on the food label. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Michael.
All right. Thanks, Lisa. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and I'll pass the screen to Christina, who will introduce the Seafood Network Information Center.
Thank you, Michael. Let me get this screen up. So hopefully you all can see my screen now. Thank you. So I'm going to introduce really quickly a resource that was actually developed at University of California in Davis and has been since updated and transferred to my caretaking at Oregon State University Seafood Lab. And that's the Seafood Network Information Center, which, like Michael said, is a warehouse for different resources available on seafood. And as you can see, it's broken up into different segments. One, the About page just kind of talks about how this resource was developed and who started it. You can go to the consumer information site and it'll get you to different consumer-related topics. A really nice topic on this is the seafoodhealthfacts.org website, which really talks about the risks and benefits of consuming seafood and helps to kind of help consumers understand really those true benefits in consuming seafood and how to weigh their risk. And then in addition to that, we have seafood industry information where it takes people to different guidelines and regulations, links and seafood information sources, things about marketing, news and publications, processing, workshops and training as well. And then finally, we also get to a section on safety, which provides you with resources on sanitation, different types of resources on safety as well. And then HACCP resources, the HACCP Alliance, and then also the HACCP listserv. So I want to talk a little bit about the HACCP listserv. This is a electronic mailing discussion list that you can get to through either the Seafood Network Information Center site, or even our Seafood Lab site too. We have different ways that you can get to this resource. Anyone can subscribe. We have 3 administrators right now that are helping with this website, and that includes myself, Dr. Kathy Liu at the University of Maryland, and Ms. Pamela Tom as Emeritus Professor who's retired from UC Davis. And this list site is intended to help especially people working in processing facilities to access, I guess, resources about problems that they are facing within the processing facility. And so you'll see a lot of different types of questions that are actually asked by a wide variety of people, whether it's somebody new to regulations or somebody new to the processing environment. And you can see those questions. If you're subscribed, you'll get access to those questions and you'll be able to help reply to the questions that are asked. But you can go to this archive and it'll show you all the different questions that are being asked. And so we can look at September, for instance, and we see that there was a question about cell-fight limits for crustaceans and who was replying on that. We also get announcements that are posted on this website or this site as well. And so in August, we had a question about seafood regulations in France and then parasites. And so the nice thing about this particular listserv is that we have a wide variety of people subscribed. There's over 1,400 people globally subscribed. And so it includes not only academics like myself, but people from nonprofits like Lisa, our regulatory partners, and then processors as well. And so usually somebody out there has an answer to your question, and it's been a really nice resource for people to get to answers fairly quickly, that they might be facing regarding a regulation or something they're observing in the processing facility. We also get people posting pictures, trying to understand different types of things that are happening with product. So it's a really nice resource for people to kind of take a look at. So just wanted to kind of broaden your awareness of this particular website and the ability to actually subscribe to the Seafood HACCP listserv. Please tell your students about it because it might be very helpful for them, especially if they're facing something that they don't have an answer for. The Seafood HACCP listserv has been a really good resource for getting very, very quick responses to questions you might have.
All right, thanks, Christina. All right, we'll pass the screen to Keith to give us an update on the NSSP model ordinance.
Thanks, Michael. Excuse me, I'll have to apologize up front for my squeaky voice since I'm trying to lose it right now, but we'll see if we can make it through here. And the NSSP model ordinance, the most recent version, was just published in early September. So there are a lot of changes, and I wanted to go through real quickly some of the highlights of that. So if I can share my screen. Start that. Hopefully everyone can see that.
Keith, you want to switch to the
Did it switch screens?
Yeah, we can see your notes.
All right. How about that?
Perfect.
All right. Thank you. So we won't go through all this, but I just wanted to, at least for information's sake, point out, that these changes were adopted at the 2023 biennial meeting. And going into that, so we have things broken down. We had 57 growing area proposals, 34 kind of plant and processing proposals, and then 17 administrative proposals that were submitted. And of that, these are the ones that were adopted: 35 dealing with growing areas, 12 dealing with processing distribution, and then 6 were administrative. And you'll be happy to know that for most people, if you're not managing or implementing a shellfish program, you don't need to know what all those changes are. But if you are interested in that, at the end, I'll give you some resources where you can look that information up. But I thought I'd go through a couple of things that would be of interest to you. Well, and then this is our process for what happens after the biennial meeting, just to let you know that. So it goes through, FDA reviews it, the conference has an opportunity to respond, and then after all those negotiations are completed, then it's published. So the first big change for us, it may be subtle, but defining shellfish sort of defines what is included in this program. In the previous definition, so if you look at only the text that's in black, was just oysters, clams, mussels. It defined it as oysters, clams, mussel, and then some caveats along with that. And it left out a few things. Probably the biggest thing in that was cockles. There's been a scientific debate about whether a cockle is a clam, and trying to stay out of that debate, we modified the definition. So we intended to include all bivalve mollusks and use this as an example. So all live or shucked bivalve mollusks, oysters, clams, cockles, and then the definition: they're shucked from the shell, raw, frozen, unfrozen, whole, or in part. But then we also amended when we were talking about scallops. So normally, we're not. The risk is different if you're only eating the muscle, the adductor muscle of a scallop, and that's where when you start to look at roe-on or whole scallops, where we would want to include those in the program. The previous definition included if it was attached to the shell, even if it was only a mussel. So that was modified to make it clear that even if you have a scallop shell that's attached to the shell still, it is not part of the NSSP regulation. And then for state shellfish programs, there was a significant change in how those the inspection program is evaluated by FDA. So if you want information on that, you can let us know and we'll get that information to you. This was a change dealing with CCPs for shellfish dealers. So there was a requirement that a shipping dealer had to document the temperature of the conveyance when they shipped And that information had to be provided to the receiving dealer. And it was in the receiving dealer's CCP. It was required under model ordinance that dealer had to check that. And that was removed. It partially conflicted with some other parts of the NSSP model ordinance. So that section was removed. And so that was a change with a receiving CCP for a shellfish dealer. And our minimum inspection frequencies changed. So they were quarterly for sugar packers and repackers. And a new caveat was added for operations that are only certified for less than 6 months. And they are now only required to be inspected annually if they're certified for only 6 months. And that would apply to all the dealer types. And so just some overall other things, when there was a significant reorganization of the guidance document section, it's a big part of the overall guide. The document itself is getting close to 600 pages, and the guidance documents are a big chunk of that. So reorganizing it, hopefully to make that easier to use. We have new guidance related to biotoxins and aquaculture practices. And we had some new requirements that were added for harvesters that work in federal waters or the shellfish dealers that receive product from those individuals. And for information, and if you'd like to look at all that, you can check our website, issc.org. And on our main page, there's NSSP guide at the top, and you can look in there for that. You can, of course, email me or our office, or you can give us a call. And then under that section for the NSSP guide, we have the official version, which is a clean copy of what the requirements are. But we also post what is the 2019 version that shows all the track changes of what was adopted at the 2023 conference. And though we don't have it on the website yet, we also have another document that we will post there. We'll give you a quick rundown of just a line list of all the section changes in the page to go look if you wanted to look up that particular document, so you don't have to scroll through the whole thing. And the proposal number that the proposal that was adopted that made that change, which gives you more information about what the submitter, the justification they had when they submitted the proposal, and what amendments may have been made before it was finally adopted. And with that, that's all I had.
Thanks, Keith. All right, remember you can put questions in the chat. We're going to have a Q&A shortly. Just real quickly going to introduce the resource PDF that will be shared after this and be made available on the Seafood HACCP Alliance resources webpage, both the AFTA one as well as the Florida Sea Grant webpage. And this is a value added to trainers to provide their participants, or for trainers to have easy access to the variety of resources that are available. Again, we start off at the top of this document with the links that I introduced first to the Florida Sea Grant webpage, the FDA's Seafood HACCP page housing the hazards guide, and all HACCP related information, and the AFTA website for Seafood HACCP Alliance training. We go into some agency resources, specifically looking first at, in general, the Electronic Code of Federal Regulations, where folks can access the various regulations associated with all federal requirements, and especially Title 21 food processing and the Seafood HACCP regulation, Part 123 within that. And then some specific USFDA pages. So the seafood resources page, aquaculture seafood page, the draft guidance for control of listeria and ready-to-eat foods available through FDA. There's a guidance document on Seafood HACCP and FSMA. So how does FSMA impact the seafood industry? What parts of FSMA do the seafood industry need to worry about? There's a link to the sanitary transport for human and animal foods rule, the FSMA adulteration rule. We've got the National Shellfish Sanitation Program Model Ordinance link there that's housed also on the FDA website. The new traceability rule is also linked, the web page on FDA for more information on that rule that's coming out. We've got the food defense training and FSMA intentional adulteration rule listed, as well as the FDA bad bugs book, seafood list, and the newest release, this importing FDA regulated seafood products that was just put out, I believe, this week, is also linked there. There's also a couple links to USDA resources. So for anyone working with catfish, USDA inspection of siliformis and country of origin labeling, which is also run through USDA. Second page, we go into industry and NGO resources, where we look at, have all the NFI resources that you heard about today are all linked under there, including the ready-to-eat, seafood pathogen controls, best practices for addressing fraud, food labeling requirements, and traceability resources. And we also have the AFTO control of pathogens and ready-to-eat seafood products listed there. Lastly, we have a section that highlights some academic resources that are available out there. These are mostly going to pages that we know have a lot of seafood-specific resources and or have specific seafood labs at their universities, including New York Sea Grant Seafood Resource page, the Seafood Network Information Center, which Christina introduced, is linked there, as well as the Oregon State University Seafood Lab, the Virginia Seafood Agriculture Research and Extension Center, who does a lot of seafood research and support, Louisiana Fisheries Forward page, and lastly, Mississippi State University's Experimental Seafood Processing Lab. As it notes at the bottom of this slide, we intend to at least once a year go through and update this resource and add additional resources. And part of our intent here with the webinar today is to get additional resources that might be relevant or important to include in this document. So we welcome you to send those along in the chat, or you can send them directly to myself or AFTO, either at the SHA director at afto.org, which will come directly to me, or HACCP at afto.org will come to the AFTO administrators for the Alliance. And I will put both of those in the chat. I also will send right now a link to this document. That link is temporary. It's going to expire tomorrow because, again, we want to get feedback, additional resources that we need to add, and then we'll have a final published link available on the website. Again, encouraging trainers to share this with their participants either before or after their training as an additional resource so they can learn more and access this information that's not directly covered in the training curriculum. So with that, I will stop sharing. I see there's a bunch of questions coming in the chat. And we'll open up for Q&A, as well as some feedback on resources that might be relevant or necessary to include in that resource document that we'll be sharing with trainers. So I'll start with some questions in the chat. You can also raise your hand, and Michelle from AFTO administering today will unmute you and you can ask your question live. So the first question here looks like from Ken. I think this is to you, Keith. So when we receive shellfish, it is no longer required to have time temperature statements.
So the requirement for the shipping dealer had been that they had to document that the product was cooled and that it was going into a truck cooled. That they had to document the actual temperature of the truck. So documenting the actual temperature of the truck was taken out. So that, and then of course that applies to when the receiving dealer gets it, and they were having to receive that information and document on their record for receiving that they didn't accept it unless that shipping dealer had provided that. So that section was taken out. There's still requirements to do the cooling. It's just not a HACCP requirement to provide that documentation.
And I think there was a few questions all related to that, and you answered in the chat as well. But if that didn't clarify it, feel free to raise your hand or let us know in the chat if there's some more clarification you want on there. There's another question. Looks like Christina regarding shellfish. Transportation records are still required, like you said. Taking truck temperature at the time of receiving by receiving dealers no longer required. All right. So I guess Christina is just clarifying that. Perfect. Any other questions? And I hear people are having issues accessing that link. Or is that correct for everybody, or is that just? Yeah, I will try and send another one in the chat for you guys. Again, raise your hand if you'd have a question you'd like to ask, or put it in the chat. Will the Q&A be part of the link after? The Q&A will be recorded. If there are specific questions that come up that are relevant to the Alliance training, there's a good chance that you will see them come up in the trainer FAQ on the Seafood HACCP Alliance webpage. But yeah. And if there are questions we get that we need to follow up on, we can follow up and work with our speakers to get those answered and follow up later. All right, we'll give another minute or two for questions, but I will add in the chat now, if you do have to jump off, please do complete our evaluation from today's webinar before you jump off. Let us know if this relevant information was relevant. Should we continue to do things like this? What resources or information do you want to hear more about? We will continue these community engagement webinars. Our plan currently is to do 3 webinars a year. First one is always going to be an update from the executive committee and all the various efforts and work groups that are working on various parts of the Seafood HACCP Alliance training program. And then from there, we'll kind of tailor it based on the interest, need, and new things happening within the Alliance. All right, so we've got another question. Can you expand why that requirement was removed, considering the importance of temperature during transport?
I'll do my best. So there were conflicting requirements. There was a change in the 2019 version that added a section where it had been an or in requirements. It put in an and that particular thing was causing problems with the dealers to honestly require that information. When they ship and they load the truck and they open the doors, the temperature changes, and so there are a lot of opportunity for that truck temperature to not be exactly what it should be, even though it had been pre-cooled, and they were concerned that it was influencing falsification of the records. And it was not. The requirements are there, so this was a matter of whether or not they had to ship that documentation with the truck. So that's why that was removed.
Thanks, Keith. Any other questions? We've got a couple more minutes. These are intended to be 45-minute webinars, so we've got a few more minutes to spare if there are any more questions. But if not, I'm sure everybody is happy to get a few more minutes back in their day. All right, well, not seeing any additional questions come through. Again, feel free to reach out to myself, to AFTO. Our speakers provided their contact information. Please do complete that evaluation linked in the chat before you jump off today. But thank you again for joining. Yes, the 6th edition is still valid for training. The 7th is not available yet for purchase. And the changes weren't significant, so it shouldn't change too much in terms of the training and the content. So yes, you can still use that 6th edition. But once that 7th edition is available, we do recommend that you start using that 7th edition once it is available for purchase and digitally online. Not seeing link in the chat. Let's try that again. All right, sending the link to the evaluation again. Should it be at the bottom of your chat box? Another comment in here, the guide is not clear that the product temperature needs to be taken by the receiver. I think that's again, Keith, sorry.
Mike, we do have one hand
Yeah.
raised too. Nancy, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. And go ahead, Nancy.
Thanks. I still don't see your evaluation link,
No.
Michael. So for some reason, just wanted to, before everybody leaped off.
Mike, I think you put it to host and panelist only. That's why.
No wonder. Sorry, everybody. There's the link. I'm used to running meetings, not webinars.
Thank you, Nancy.
You should see it now. So you didn't get any of my links. All right. But I will put email contacts in there now that I've got the right list I'm sending to. Sorry about that. Thank you, Nancy. And there we go.
So it's that last link, Mike, that is not, there's access denied on that last link.
Access denied. All
Yeah.
right.
So
Send us your
I can figure that out later.
Send us your recommendations for that guide. Hopefully remember what we went through and what was on it. I don't know. Yeah, because it's not in my SharePoint, so we'll have to figure that out, but. All right, well, thank you, everybody. I'll post that link to the evaluation at least in the chat one more time, so it's at the bottom of the chat for anybody who needs it. But we will see you again in 2025 with our first community engagement webinar to start off and kick off with an update from the executive committee. Oh, got another question. Is transit time record is needed for non-histamine fish? I mean, I could touch on that. It would depend on what the intended use of that fish is. If it's going to be a raw, ready to eat product or not cooked or experience any kill step, yes, you would definitely need it. So it's part of your hazard analysis. You need to assess whether or not that is necessary. So there's no kind of blanket answer to that one. And then Michelle, did you say, was there another hand raised or no?
Nope, that was it.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining.